That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eons even death may die. That, my friends, is from the dreaded Necronomicon, which this isn't. This is just a book by H.P. Lovecraft. The Necronomicon doesn't actually exist. It was created by H.P. Lovecraft as one of the central things in the Cthulhu mythos. The Necronomicon, the dreaded Necronomicon, written by the mad Arab Abdul al-Hazred. So the Necronomicon, one of the most important things in the Cthulhu mythos, it's one of the things that ties the mythos together, is this horrifying ancient book of black magic or worse. So when I started doing these Mythos Mondays here at stately Vaughan Manor, I was thinking, I should talk about H.P. Lovecraft himself. I should talk about the stories, and I should talk about some other stuff that are in the stories. And I talked about H.P. Lovecraft. I've talked about a bunch of stories, and we'll talk about more. But the stuff I forgot to talk about. But the Necronomicon is one of the most important things in the Cthulhu mythos, so I thought I'd take a few minutes and talk about it. The Necronomicon, which has become incredibly famous for a book that doesn't actually exist. Plenty of folks think it does. It doesn't. But plenty of folks think it does. That's the way it goes. When you create something so iconic, a lot of people think it actually exists. In fact, back in the olden days, when H.P. Lovecraft was writing the Cthulhu mythos, before it was even the Cthulhu mythos, he would get people writing into Weird Tales saying, this Yog-Sothoth, the Necronomicon, is this stuff real? I never heard of this stuff before. Because he gave it such a sense of reality. All stuff that, of course, H.P. Lovecraft made up. But as he went along writing in his stories, the Necronomicon became very important. The quote I gave you was actually from a story called The Nameless City. But the Necronomicon itself wasn't introduced in his story until The Hound, which was before he wrote Call of Cthulhu and all the Cthulhu mythos. So the Necronomicon was an earlier invention that became very important in the Cthulhu mythos and is mentioned all over the place. It became so important that H.P. Lovecraft felt he should write, for his own personal use, a history of the Necronomicon, which he can use and share. It's relatively small, and just for educational purposes, I think that I will read it to you, so you too will know the terrifying history of the Necronomicon. So, the history of the Necronomicon. Original title, Al-Azif. Azif being the word used by the Arabs to designate that nocturnal sound made by insects, supposed to be the howling of demons. Composed by Abdul al-Hazred, a mad poet of Sana'a in Yemen, who is said to have flourished during the period of the Umayyad Caliphs, circa 700 AD. He visited the ruins of Babylon and the subterranean secrets of Memphis, and spent 10 years alone in the great southern deserts of Arabia. The Rob el-Khelieh, or empty space of the ancients, and Dana, or crimson desert of the modern Arabs, which is held to be inhabited by protective evil spirits and monsters of death. Of this desert, many strange and unbelievable marvels are told by those who pretend to have penetrated it. In his last years, Al-Hazred dwelt in Damascus, where the Necronomicon, Al-Azif, was written, and of his final death or disappearance, 738 AD, many terrible and conflicting things are told. He is said by Ibn Khaldun, 12th century biographer, to have been seized by an invisible monster in broad daylight and devoured horribly before a large number of fright-frozen witnesses. Of his madness many things are told. He claimed to have seen the fabulous Irem, or City of Pillars, and to have found beneath the ruins of a certain nameless desert town the shocking annals and secrets of a race older than mankind. He was only an indifferent Muslim, worshipping unknown entities whom he called Yog, Sothoth, and Cthulhu. In AD 950, the Azif, which had gained a considerable though surreptitious circulation amongst philosophers of the age, was secretly translated into Greek by Theodorus Philetus of Constantinople under the title Necronomicon. For a century it impelled certain experimenters to terrible attempts, when it was suppressed and burnt by the Patriarch Michael. After this it is only heard of furtively, but 1228 Olaus Wormius made a Latin translation later in the Middle Ages, and the Latin text was printed twice. Once in the 15th century. It's okay. It's not a monster. You darn near scared me to death, little one. What are you trying to do? Frighten the bejeebies out of me? Now, listen. I need you to be very quiet because we're talking about the Necronomicon, and that's very terrifying. So, I'm going to let you go, and you be good while I continue this horrifying history. There you go, little one. Sorry about that horrifying interruption. Where was we? Let's see. Oh, yes. It was printed twice. Once in the 15th century in black letter, evidently in Germany, and once in the 17th, probably Spanish. Both editions being without identifying marks and located as to time and place by internal typographical evidence only. The works, both Latin and Greek, was banned by Pope Gregory in 1232, shortly after its Latin translation, which called attention to it. The Arabic original was lost as early as Wormius's time, as indicated by his prefatory note, and no sight of the Greek copy, which was printed in Italy between 1500 and 1550, has been reported since the burning of a certain Salem man's library in 1692. An English translation made by Dr. Dee was never printed, and exists only in fragments recovered from the original manuscript. Of the Latin text now existing, one, 15th century, is known to be in the British Museum under lock and key, while another, 17th century, is in the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. A 17th century edition is in the Widener Library at Harvard, and in the Library of Miskatonic University in Arkham. Also in the Library of the University of Buenos Aires. Numerous other copies probably exist in secret. And a 15th century one is persistently rumored to form a part of the collection of a celebrated American millionaire. A still vaguer rumor credits the preservation of a 16th century Greek text in the Salem family of Pickman. But if it was so preserved, it vanished with the artist R.U. Pickman, who disappeared in early 1926. The book is rigidly suppressed by the authorities of most countries, and by all branches of organized ecclesiasticism. Reading leads to terrible consequences. It was from rumors of this book, of which relatively few of the general public know, that R.W. Chambers is said to have derived the idea of his early novel, The King in Yellow. So, you now have the dreadful history of the Necronomicon. H.P. Lovecraft used this history and stuck to this history in his horrifying tales. Now, since the Cthulhu mythos, the Necronomicon has kind of grown into a thing of its own. There was a film called the Necronomicon. There have been different books called the Necronomicon. A lot of movies like the Evil Dead, for example, you'll find the dreadful, horrifying Necronomicon popping up, causing all kinds of trouble, which of course it does. It is a brilliant invention, frequently copied, this idea. But it was a great idea. And it's one of those things that gives the Cthulhu mythos a real feeling of reality when you read it. It's, like I said, one of those things that ties the mythos together. And the further you get into the mythos, the more you learn about what's in the dreadful Necronomicon. I think it's in the Dunwich Horror that we get actual text from the Necronomicon, which is frightening itself. So it's an interesting thing, the Necronomicon. It's been, like I said, very influential. It's hard if you're writing, I think, a Lovecrafty type of thing, not to give in to the temptation to use it. And Lovecraft actually, when he was writing his mythos stories, he was pen pals with a bunch of different writers like Clark Ashton Smith and Robert E. Howard. And he always said to other writers, use this stuff. Use Yog-Sothoth. Use Cthulhu. Use the Necronomicon. Throw this stuff in your stories too if you want to, because it'll just make it all seem the more real. So in a way, in Weird Tales, H.P. Lovecraft and his friends kind of came up with their own shared universe before shared universes were really a thing. Way ahead of his time, this guy, H.P. Lovecraft. Well, I figured I've frightened you enough with the horrifying tale of this book, which, I'm telling you, it's fictional. It's not real. I don't have a copy of my own. I'm not planning horrifying madness. No, it's fake. Trust me. So I will catch you next time here at stately Vaughan Manor. And tomorrow is Tuesday, and I'm doing an original tag, which was created by that horrifying fellow A.J. Dunn. So that'll be fun. So catch me back here tomorrow for Tag Tuesday. I will see you next time.